losing the Super Bowl sucks. Losing it the way the Broncos did is not nearly as bad as the way the Seahawks did the next year. Like, you'd rather just get your ass kicked. Then you can turn off the game at halftime, just go do anything else.
Coming up today, it's episode 114 of In the Front Row. Our guest today is Michael-Shawn Dugar. He is a beat writer for the Seattle Seahawks, writing for The Athletic. Also has a new book out from our friends from Triumph Books. It's called The Franchise, the Seattle Seahawks, the Legion of Boom Era. Yes, it's a great time in the history of the franchise, celebrating 50th anniversary this year, but it takes you through the Super Bowl victory in Super Bowl 48 and the Super Bowl loss in Super Bowl 49 against the Patriots, and that goal line stand, the interception at the goal line that led to a loss for the Seahawks and maybe the end of what could have been a dynasty for Seattle as well. It's episode 114 of In the Front Row. Michael-Shawn, thank you so much for joining us here today. Excited to talk to you about your new book that's out. You see it over your left shoulder there, and talk about the Seahawks. And this is a little personal to me as a Seattle Seahawks fan as well. But before we get into your book, into the Seahawks, tell us a little bit about you. I know obviously you're the beat writer for the Seahawks for The Athletic. How did that come about for you, and what are you doing beyond that as well?
Thank you for having me. I owe a lot to Steve Cohen, one of our editors at The Athletic. In 2017, I replaced Steve at the Seattle PI. Prior to that, I was the sports editor of the Moscow Pullman Daily News, covering high school sports in Northern Idaho and University of Idaho athletics. I think I only went to one Seahawks game as a fan in 2011 versus the Bengals. And that was cool, but it wasn't like my team per se. I'm always going to be like a hometown person, though. I don't really subscribe to rooting for other teams that aren't my hometown team. You can root for other people or whatever if your family's from somewhere. But for me, I'll never root for another baseball team, never another women's basketball team, another soccer team. It's always going to be hometown first, unless I know somebody on the other team. But now I have a book about the best era in franchise history that feels really cool. This era is probably going to be written about quite a bit. There's going to be documentaries created around this era, this time period in Seattle sports history, not just football. And I'm first on it, at least in this manner. I know there's been a few other things, but to this magnitude, this is one of those first things kicking off the deep dive, the nostalgia into that era. So as someone who's from here, that's really cool to shine a light on Seattle and myself in that way.
Yeah, how'd the book come about?
Triumph reached out to me to continue their franchise series. They've done some baseball, they've done some hockey. I know they've done some NFL. My colleague at The Athletic, Zach Berman, did the one for the Philadelphia Eagles. He's our Eagles beat writer. So they're familiar with The Athletic. We're familiar with me. Reached out asking me to do a history. And I was like, I don't really want to do a history. I was born in 1992. So I was born the year, I think that's when Cortez won Defensive Player of the Year. I don't want to write about that. The 80s that'd be a cool time period to write about, but that'd be a lot of look back for someone who experienced none of it. I don't want to be someone rewriting history. So that'd have been tough in the 70s. There's not that much other than obviously the origin of the franchise. So I really wanted to cut it down. At first I was saying, let's do from when they joined the NFC West, because that's something I'm more familiar with. I was, I think, 10 years old when Quest Field first opened. So that I have fond memories of. But even then, just doing a little initial research on that time period, I'd be selling a lot of prominent guys short by trying to write about 20 years of history in a few hundred pages. Sean Alexander probably would have got a chapter, and that's a prominent dude. I told them, can I cut it down to the Pete era? And I pitched how it would look and everything. And I really liked that they were willing to do something a little different than some of their other books had done, because a lot of them are just a straight 1, 2, 3, here's how it happened, or just a pretty surface level rundown of the prominent moments, players, which is fine. I have no problem with that. But I figured if I was going to do something about this era, it had to allow for enough depth of the main characters. And so that's how we got to doing it, a curated history of specifically the Legion of Boom era.
Yeah. Well, did you learn something about the franchise that you didn't know going into this?
Yeah, several things. I learned a lot within the research. Did a lot of research, did a lot of original interviews, aggregated a lot of long form podcast interviews with some pretty prominent guys. Marshawn did some stuff, Golden Tate did some stuff, Luke Wilson, the guys who had a lot to say, but I couldn't necessarily always sit down with. So that was cool to hear from them in a safer space. I think we're in the space of player podcasts. And as a journalist, that kind of stinks because they're sitting down with players instead of the people who've been trained to do this. But the payoff, I think, is that you're getting stuff out of them that maybe they just wouldn't tell a journalist because they don't know you as well. If KJ Wright sits down with Golden Tate, he's probably more likely to open up about the Russell Wilson rumors with his ex-wife and everything more than he would with me. I can still use it. It still exists in the space. That was one thing I learned about the way that the rumor that Golden had slept with Russ's ex-wife impacted the locker room, the depths of the beef between Marshawn and pretty much all of the important people in the organization, the quarterback, the head coach, and the general manager, how important culture was to the success of the defense, not just the scheme they were running. Everybody can run cover three, but to run it the way they were running it took a certain type of person for it to work with that consistency. We've seen a lot of teams hold teams to 14 points a game, 15 points a game. But the Seahawks were 4 years in a row the number one scoring defense, and I feel very confident that we will never see anything like that again because of the camaraderie that those guys have was just so strong. I knew it was strong, but now I know it was really strong. And I saw why it broke when the Super Bowl 49 interception happened. I knew that things fell down after that, but the depths of it and why. There's a lot of whys to why that particular play made things unravel. So that was probably the biggest and most like juicy thing to learn, but there were just so many little things all along the way. How Marshawn was just such a beloved figure in there. Like I learned the depths of that. It was pretty cool. I learned a lot of stuff about that era, about Pete, about how John operated. Not everything could make the book because even though it's a book, there are page limits. So a lot of stuff on the cutting room floor, but I feel like I learned a lot about an era that I came in on the tail end of. So it was cool to revisit some of that stuff with fresher eyes and journalist eyes instead of fan and Seattle native eyes.
You think the defense was a much tighter unit than the offense. The offense was being dysfunctional, but the defense was where that camaraderie was. Is that what you found out?
I think there was camaraderie on both sides, whereas on defense, it was spread out. Everyone just loved each other very strongly, particularly on the back end. Whereas on offense, it was more so everyone loved Marshawn. And so, whereas on the back end in the Legion of Boom, it was like, we're doing this for our brothers. Cam Chancellor likes to say that Legion of Boom also stood for Love Our Brothers. That was their thing. Richard Sherman, when he did his famous pregame ritual with those guys, the we're all who's got my back. So that thing, it was a brotherhood there in the secondary for sure. And I think the entire offense felt that way about Marshawn. And so there was a camaraderie there as well, but it was also more so we are marching to the beat of the Marshawn drum, and it worked. My Hall of Fame case for Marshawn Lynch would be that he was a running back with a championship offense built around him. And when it happens, you just feel it. It's hard to quantify built around someone. That would probably be where some more analytically inclined people would push back on that. But when you see it, it's one of those things. The Eagles just showed us, right? That was a championship winning offense. Although it had a Super Bowl MVP quarterback, it had all Pro Bowl receivers, Devontae Smith and AJ Brown. That thing was built around giving the ball to 26. That's the strongest argument for Saquon being a Hall of Famer, I think. They had camaraderie. It was just shaped differently on each side of the ball. But the way that like a Cam Chancellor felt about Earl and felt about Sherman, felt about Byron Maxwell and so on and so forth, that's how everyone felt on the entire team, I should add, about Marshawn Lynch.
Being a Seattle native and following this franchise earlier, did this maybe tarnish or change your view of the franchise at all?
No, but that's a good question. Something I was critical of, and in the reporting, mostly towards the end, I was like, man, Pete kind of misplayed this. There was almost a set of separate rules for how you can interact with Russell versus this kind of cutthroat energy he allowed for everyone else to participate in. It was a conscious effort on Pete's part. He didn't subconsciously do this. It was intentional. And I looked at it and I was like, oh man, Pete kind of misplayed that. But then I got to the end and I talked to Pete multiple times for the book. And then I just then realized I don't really know how else he could have played that and made it work. Because I do think that if you kind of let Russ go to the Wolves and be one of the guys who got MF'd every day in practice and told they weren't worth anything, I think that would have been equally as problematic as having a different set of rules that the other guys called BS on or claimed as hypocrisy. It didn't tarnish it, but it was eye opening. It was tough. I can see why Pete chose to conduct things the way he did. It worked. He's a Hall of Famer as well. It was a very tricky balance. There were a big bunch of habitual line steppers, and it's hard to control that. And I thought Pete did the best job he could, but there were some obvious missteps there. And then I think that one thing that's really gonna stand out forever is Russell's legacy in Seattle. It's just one of those
Mhm.
complicated ones now. And that every once in a while with a star player and a city for whatever reason, maybe it's because of how an ending went, a contract, a beef with the owner. Kevin Garnett in Minnesota comes to mind. There's a bunch, but that's gonna be Russell's. And it's weird because this team does not have a lot of success. They're celebrating the 50th anniversary of the team this year, and there are 3 Super Bowl appearances, 1 win. In essence, he is the quarterback associated with this era, and he's not universally beloved, not even by the fans, by the organization, or by the teammates, despite all the success he had, and despite a pretty clean public image. If you take someone like Terrell Owens, there's a reason why he's not universally beloved by Dallas or Philly or San Francisco, whatever. You can get that,
Mhm.
particularly Philly, because his image is portrayed a certain way. Russ is like perfect marketing guy for everything. Family man, never in the news for anything, no legal problems, nothing like spousal, nothing really egregious with his teammates either. You Google Russell Wilson and teammates, and it's all stuff you got to read the tea leaves on. No really heated arguments at halftime, anything like that. And yet you can find guys who dislike him as much as
Yeah.
Eagles guys dislike Carson Wentz or Bears dislike Jay Cutler. You can just go down a list of guys whose images are more understandably and more publicly tarnished within their franchise. And then there's Russell who falls right in that category, but for reasons that weren't as well known prior to me writing this book.
So Russell hands off to Marshawn Lynch. He scores a touchdown. They win back-to-back Super Bowls. Are you still writing this book, or is it a different book?
Oh, it's a completely different book. And probably not as compelling, depending on how it all comes crashing down, because it does eventually. I haven't read a ton of books, and I know there's a documentary on Jerry Jones and that dynastic run they had in the mid 90s there. I would imagine it goes something like that, where that had some drama towards the end too, as anything involving Jerry Jones tends to. So maybe it would have had some drama towards the end regardless. But I do think that the interception, because it was hanging on by a thread, but winning cures all. So if you're back-to-back Super Bowl champs, it would have maybe still fallen down, but not in the way it did. And that's just dramatic as hell. Losing the Super Bowl sucks. Losing it the way the Broncos did is not nearly as bad as the way the Seahawks did the next year. Like you'd rather just get your ass kicked. Then you could turn off the game at halftime, just go do anything else. To be a few feet away from immortality in that way is just something that fans will never forget. And the fact that it happened back-to-back years is really important too. I remember one time I was talking to Sherman, he had mentioned if we'd have won the second one, A, we would have won a third one, which who knows, maybe.
Yeah.
But B, they would have been the best defense ever. They would have beaten Tom Brady and Peyton Manning in back-to-back Super Bowls while being the number one scoring defense for at that time 3 years in a row. And the difference between being the best defense and one of the best defenses in the history books, that does mean something because now you're just lumped in with the 2002 Bucks and the 2000 Ravens and some Steelers defenses, Bears. But I think they would have had a very strong argument to leap all of that by beating those two quarterbacks. They had a nickname. Your defense can't be great without a nickname. They had all the pieces. And then that Super Bowl nuked it. I'd probably be writing a book, but it would be entirely different. And Russell's place in it would be different. It'd
Yeah.
be far different because that was the big pivot point for his place in the organization, I think. It was trending the wrong way for a minute there, but it really hit the fan with that interception. And who knows, it may not have ever if he just hands the ball to Marshawn.
And who made that call? Some people said he wanted to be the hero. Russ didn't want to hand it off because he wanted that MVP. He wanted to know that he was the guy at that moment to take the Seahawks back to back Super Bowls. Do you get into that in the book? Who made that call?
Unfortunately, there was no juicy new detail there. It was like they were telling us in real time. Pete Carroll got down there. They burned a timeout after Jermaine Kearse's catch, which was very significant. Probably the one thing that no one really wanted to talk about. I think even Bevel was just kind of, yeah, I don't remember why we called timeout, like a genuine why, just not remembering. So they burn that timeout. When they get down there, Pete says, hey, with the clock and with our timeout, we're going to have to throw it at least once to maximize all 4 downs. And he said that in real time. There's plenty of quotes, TV interviews, and the play itself is chosen by Bevel. The decision to throw is an agreed upon decision that came from the top, which makes sense. That honestly is not even that controversial. Hey, we got one timeout, I think 50-ish seconds. It's first down. We're going to have to throw. use all four downs, which is perfect football math. It makes all the sense in the world. The play itself, that's a bevel thing. And he went in detail about the schematics, gave me the name of the play call, how it's supposed to be read out, the thought process behind it. Russ had two options. If they're in zone, go to the zone side of the play. If they're in man, go to the man side of the play. If you want to get football nerdy, that's an interesting decision there by Bevel to give Russ those options, considering what the man option was and who was on that side. On that side is Ricardo and Jermaine. The zone side is Doug, Luke, and Marshawn. To
Mm.
give him those options, knowing that the Patriots had been in man pretty much all damn day, you're almost basically calling the play for Ricardo and Jermaine's side of the field based on tendencies in the game, which coaches do have access to in real time. So, but Bevel calls the play. And I think the last piece of this that was in terms of the calling of the play that people wonder is why didn't anybody just change the play? I get into that as well in the book, but you alluded to the most obvious answer. Sometimes the real answer is just the simplest one. Why would Russ have done that? Why would
Mm.
Russell deny himself the opportunity to throw the game winning touchdown in the Super Bowl? Maybe because he has Marshawn, but come on, guys. We're not being real humans if that's their retort. You tell me, Michael-Shawn, I get to throw the game winning touchdown in the Super Bowl at the 1 yard line. I'm going to throw it. It could, come on, man. That's what you grow up for. That's what you dream of. We've all done that in your backyard, whether it's hitting the home run that wins the World Series, hitting the shot that wins the NBA Finals, or whatever your sport is, the PK in the World Cup, whatever. Like we've all done that as kids. So to think that Russ should have just given up on that is just insane. Like, you really think about the humanity of that. Just put yourself in Russ's shoes. Of course, he's not going to change that. And I can understand that. So that's what went into the call itself.
No matter who would have gotten the shine, had they won that game, would Russell Wilson, would he retire as a Seahawk? Would he be a guy that would have a statue outside of Lumina Field?
I think so. No matter how they score, whether Ricardo or Marshawn runs it in, because I do think, barring another like game-ending interception in the Super Bowl and another run and a third in a row, I just think that it would have been really hard for those guys to dwell on the past in the way that they did. Like that was something they couldn't let go, and they feel like they should have won multiple Super Bowls. They were the NFL version of the Miami Heat. LeBron, not one, not two, not three. The Heat may feel like they underachieved, but at least they got multiple and went four times in a row with LeBron, Wade, and Bosh. The Seahawks got to two and then lost one in the worst way imaginable. It's a big what if game. Maybe Marvel Universe can do like a what if series on that with my participation, of course, now. But I think that, yeah, Russell's probably super beloved. I think a lot of the stuff that guys didn't like about him before the interception probably never surfaced. Because at that point, you're just being greedy. You're just being a hater at that point. And whether you're okay with that or not is whatever. But if you're just complaining about Russell and his get down and his rules and his press conferences and his accountability, those are all probably valid critiques, but you'd be doing it about a two-time Super Bowl champ who did it all on his rookie deal. It'd be really hard to sell that to anyone and get any level of empathy worth a damn. Everything you could have imagined as a fan, whether you're a fan of the Seahawks or just a football fan, if you watched that game and saw the pick, you're like, oh, that run's over. You were right. But there was no hyperbole. If you just thought, yep, it's over, it's done, that's going to break the team, which some people wrote and said on their airwaves right after, they were right. One of the few times where everyone was right. They predicted the future in real time. That killed it right there.
They did some different things trying to put that behind him. It just never worked. Pete Carroll, he had a chance to bring the Raiders back to Seattle in the preseason here. I'm sure you were at that game. What was his reception? Because again, he's part of one of the biggest moments in the franchise's history on the good side, but then maybe the bad side as well.
Yeah, I think that fans generally have a couple options, players and coaches. When a player is new, you really love all the things that they do well. You love it. You love whatever attributes that they have. And then once they get paid or get older, you start to then highlight the things that they don't do. Even if they've never really done those things, you just care more about them now. I think DK is a really good example. When DK came in, it was like, oh my goodness, look at this big, fast, dangerous downfield threat. And then the older he got and when he got paid, it was like, okay, dude, why don't you do contested catches? Now we care more about the unsportsmanlike penalties that you get. Like it was things that were always part of his career, but then as he got older, he lived long enough to be the villain. And I think that kind of bit Russell a little bit. bit Bobby Wagner a little bit towards the end too, in terms of his perception from fans and the front office, to be honest, which is why he was let go twice with no intention of re-signing after either release. But I think Pete is different. I think Pete, it's just hard not to associate just pure nostalgia with Pete. And I think Pete also benefits in a lot of ways from a lot of other people getting blamed for the interception. So if you go down the list, Pete isn't that high usually. If you had to rank whose fault is the play, they'll start with Daryl Bevel calling the play. They'll maybe critique Russ making the throw. They'll give Malcolm Butler a lot of credit for jumping it. They'll say Jermaine Kearse did a poor job picking Brandon Browner. They'll credit Brandon Browner for knowing how to beat that because he used to be a Seahawk. They'll blame Ricardo's lazy route. There's all these other people before you can reasonably get to Pete. And I think he benefits a lot from that, particularly because Bevel is who called the play. If Pete was a play calling head coach, he might be screwed. Sean McVay does that, even though he's got a Super Bowl. His legacy, I think, would be very altered in LA, even though he has one. So I think that Pete kind of, there's people who were like, okay, Pete needed to go at the end, but it's like, Pete, you need to go, but we love you. As opposed to Russ, just go. Just go, man. If you don't want to be here, you want to demand trades, just get out of here. So I think Pete's reception was good. They put him up on the Jumbotron. He didn't really acknowledge because he didn't know he was on the Jumbotron at the time, but it seemed like a pretty warm reception there because I think Seattle people generally feel pretty good about the Pete Carroll era and what it produced and how it made them feel. And I think that's really important when we talk about nostalgia. It's what it made you feel. And they're just never going to forget how Pete made them feel.
So, writing about this area, the book is The Franchise, Seattle Seahawks from our friends with Triumph Books. And covering the team now, do you see any correlation between that time in the franchise and the current time?
There's a couple. One, I think Mike Macdonald is slowly but surely implementing the importance of messaging. He has his symbols, his taglines, and they are important. Pete brainwashed those guys in a lot of way with always compete stuff and some of the other things that those guys would say and how they would behave because that's what the guy who introduced them to the NFL, told them was the mantra and how to get down. And so he had a bunch of them. Pete wrote a book before he was the head coach of the Seahawks. So he had all of his philosophies installed, all his rules, protect the team, be on time, always compete, no complaining, practices everything. He had all of these systems in place. And Mike Macdonald has his similar lines and philosophies cut into little sentences that you can remember and regurgitate almost like robots. 12 as one is one of them, that there's shirts and hats with all that all over the building. I think another one is chasing edges, which is his version of always compete. It's the same idea, just worded differently. Principles are set in stone, methods are adjustable is another one that's more of a philosophy than a tagline. Pete Carroll was like that as well. It was an extension of always compete in that Pete's kind of known as an old fart, but he was really flexible. If you came to him and said, hey, man, we need to start paying attention to DVOA, he'd be like, all right, what's DVOA? He'd sit there, he'd listen to you, and he'd either say, that's BS, I don't care. Or he'd say, oh, yeah. And he was really big on that as it pertained to practice, sports science, just all the things that would help the players. Do we need to practice them less? How should we travel? Whenever they left the time zone, they would leave on a Friday. That's if they traveled. So not to LA or San Fran or Arizona or something. If they had to go to New York, they would leave on Friday afternoon because Pete found it was better for the guy's sleep and time zone adjustment. Like he was very flexible to all that stuff. And that's how Mike Macdonald carries himself too. I think he changed some things last year in real time about their travel, about their practice, about just how they want to do things, how they do their warm-ups. I think that's important though, because you do need to have a foundation of things you believe in. These are my non-negotiables, A, B, C. It's like being in a relationship. Like, here's my non-negotiables. I'm gonna leave the toilet seat up. I gotta sleep on this side of the bed, whatever. It's just, there's always these things, but you gotta be adjustable based on who your partner is or your circumstances. And that's really important. Mike Macdonald has those things. Whether that translates to success or not is whatever, but I do think you gotta have them. That's step one. And the other thing is, I think that Mike Macdonald has captured a style of play that is going to start to be mirrored around the league the same way that their cover three style was. I think Mike Macdonald is more like simulated pressure based. You're sending four guys, but you don't know which four guys. Am I dropping a D end? Am I dropping a D tackle? Am I sending my nickel? Am I sending both my inside linebackers or bringing my safety down? I'm confusing quarterbacks with a lot of post snap rotations. You see a lot of that around the league. You look at the guys from that Raven staff that all started calling plays last year. They were all running the same scheme. Miami's DC is from Baltimore. Jesse Minter, the Chargers DC, they had the number one scoring defense last year. He's from Michigan, so he's running the same scheme. The Titans DC, his name escapes me at the time, but he was the DB coach, I believe, in Baltimore. So all these guys running the same scheme, and now you're seeing more teams running that simulated pressure-based world. Brian Flores lives in that world too, so it's not just a Mike Macdonald thing. But I feel like we're going to see more and more of what Mike Macdonald does, how he does cover zero, how he creates the illusion of pressure without leaving your safeties and your corners on islands. He does a really good job of that. And so I think that's number two, where there's some similarities there, just a trendsetter defense. And the final one is that I think you're starting to see the defense have a same level of camaraderie. I feel like the way guys want to play for Devin Witherspoon is very similar to the way guys want to play for Marshawn Lynch. And it's for a similar reason. If you didn't know nothing else about ball and I just gave you the film in the middle of the night, no sound, you don't know who's who, you'd be like, wow, man, number 21 is everywhere. He just has these big ball of energy. Like he's just physical, he's fast, and he's just animated. And Marshawn wasn't animated per se, but you could watch a football game in 2011 with those Seahawks. Wow, man, 24. Who is that? Same thing. And there was something infectious about his personality, his play style, and his accountability. And Devin Witherspoon, I think, has a similar impact on his teammates. And I think you need that. It worked for their offense with Marshawn, and I think it should work for their defense as well, where everyone just holds himself accountable, plays really hard, gives their all, plays through injury, is willing to do whatever and sacrifice because that's the standard in the room or on that side of the ball set by a player. And I think Spoon is who kind of sets that on defense, but particularly in their secondary, which I believe will be really good.
Again, with the book, it's a tell all, and there's the good, the bad, the ugly. Any concerns for you for someone who's currently, again, on the beat with the team of putting stuff in there that the team wouldn't like? Did you get any feedback from the team about anything that is in there and force you to make any kind of changes?
Not forced to make any changes. It helps that, and not for Pete, that Pete got fired. I do think that helped. It gave my book an ending, for one, because I signed the book deal in 2023 when he was still the coach. So I was writing about the first third of it. I was like, where am I going to end this thing? Because it's about the Pete era. I know we call it Legion of Boom mostly for marketing purposes, but it's the Pete era. And okay, the Pete era is still going. Where do I cut this off? And he got fired. Oh, here's my ending. So I think that helped with that because now we're exclusively writing about a prior era.
Right.
I probably wouldn't have gotten Pete for the book if he was still the head coach of the team. So I think that helped a lot and mitigated any potential concerns there. And I was just telling somebody this yesterday. I didn't have to chase salacious beefs and stories and drama because the truth was juicy enough. It really was. I didn't have to over exaggerate anything. I didn't have to put a bunch of hyperbole in there and get a bunch of anonymous quotes about guys poo-pooing each other. I could have got that, but I didn't need to because on the record stuff was good enough. It told you what you needed to tell. It really did. And that was my main goal with the book. Get the gist of why it worked and why it fell apart. That's the goal. Get the gist of why it worked and why it fell apart. And if I could do that, there are some stories in there, some juicy nuggets that contribute to that, but nothing that the team needed to police or monitor. And the team gave me some guys on Zoom too for the book. So they were aware of it. They watched the interviews are recorded, and they knew I wasn't going to do anything crazy as well because I just don't want that to be my legacy either. I still work here, still live here, right? Burning a bunch of bridges just to sell a few books doesn't really help me. I shouted out some of the team people in the acknowledgments for that reason. They were very gracious. They helped it come together, and they did it in a way that felt more like a partnership than like me having to pull teeth to get this interview, that thing. And yeah, the truth was juicy enough that I didn't have to burn any bridges, which was, I was really fortunate.
Doug Baldwin writes the forward in this book. Have other guys read it or seen some of it to give you any kind of feedback, guys that you're writing about?
Not yet. It's only been out for a few days. There's some guys I got to get copies to, and I've been a little sluggish on that. I owe KJ write a copy. I need to get Doug's his. I just need to personalize it. I'm not sure what to write, but not yet. I'm looking forward to that. I owe Cliff a copy. There's some other guys. I don't have to name everybody, but Pete has one. I got him one on Thursday. I know Bobby's an audiobook guy. I'm very curious what he thinks. It's not in audio form yet. I'm working on it. So I'll see if I can get him one. He's an avid reader. I'm very curious his thoughts. A lot of these guys are really busy though right now, like Bobby playing for the Commanders right now, and KJ Wright's coach for the Niners, Pete's coach. So it may take a while I imagine that some of the stuff people would just tell them about once they read it. That was something I kept in mind, and also why I didn't just air a bunch of dirty laundry per se, because I wrote it as if those guys would read it, because I want them to. And I wrote it as if they would read it in front of me too. I'm not some untouchable person. You can catch me with my daughter or my son at the park just like any other human being, right? And I don't have security. So don't write nothing crazy. And there's also behind the scenes of book writing, there's an indemnification clause in there too. So I don't want to write anything too crazy. Then lawyers start getting called out. Not yet is the short answer to that question, but I'm looking forward to that. And it was written with them in mind. I'm not going to lie to help make them look better, but the book is so much about the humanity of the characters that it would be contradictory to do something that went against that idea. Like I need to humanize them with my writing as just as much as I'm humanizing them and telling their stories.
Again, as a kid who grew up in Seattle, a fan of this franchise, this has to be a dream come true for you to have a book. It's your first book that comes out and it's about something that you grew up loving. What goes through your mind when you see that book cover?
A lot of things. The first thing is my name just on it, my last name in particular, the symbolism of representing people in your family if they're not here. The front screensaver of my phone is my late great grandmother. On the inside, my homepage is my dog that died in 2014. You can see this necklace that I'm wearing with this heart pendant. My uncle's ashes are in it. And on my forearm is a tattoo of my cousin's face. He got killed in 2017 by a driver. And sometimes when somebody gets killed by a driver, they put like the drive safe sign. So I have the tattoo of the sign that says drive safe as well. And every day I wear my uncle's watch with me when I go to work. And all those people have the same last name as me, with the exception of my grandmother. Just seeing our last name on the book is pretty cool. I signed the book a month after I had my daughter. So she's in the tributes in the very beginning. And then my son was just born 2 weeks ago. So I couldn't get his name in there yet because I didn't have a name for him when I turned the book in. So that's unfortunate. But he's acknowledged in the acknowledgments as well. So just something that they can be proud of eventually. That feels really cool. That's something positive for our last name, because I bring up the last name because on the Dugar side of my family, I think there were 7 grandkids before my son was born, and they were all girls. So there was a world there where we run out of Dugars if all the women just grow up and get married, however long that takes, and then they just name all their kids after their spouses' last names. And then we're out of Dugars there about 2050 or something, or 2060. And that would be really unfortunate. Like, this is one way we can live on forever, no matter what. The Dugar did a thing, and it's going to be a part of Seattle's history forever.
What's your son's name?
It's funny you said that this is like a dream come true. My son's name is Dream.
Wow.
Yeah, and
That's powerful.
his middle name is the name of my cousin that I mentioned, who has the sign and the tattoo. So that's pretty cool. Like I said, his name's not in the book because I didn't have one for him at the time, but that's what I ended up settling on.
Great stuff, powerful stuff, talking about your family for sure. I know you're on social media. How can people follow you? I know you're putting some stuff out there, some teasers and everything with the book as well.
Yeah, you can follow me at Mike Dugar. That's on X or Twitter, whatever Elon's calling it now. Dugar Mike on Instagram is just flipped. Same thing on Blue Sky as well. Follow me on all those platforms. Everything that has to do with the book and my podcast, Seahawks Man to Man, is all available on all those platforms. My Twitter, if you just follow me, that's a one-stop shop. Instagram as well. Blue Sky, I'm still trying to get to the hang of. When you have small kids, like posting on social media decreases in frequency a little bit, but I'm trying. The book is out now, available wherever books are sold, on Amazon, on Triumph, Barnes and Noble, doesn't matter. And then internationally too. I know some people have asked me about that. It's got a text today from someone in the Netherlands who got it. So in Australia, Canada, I think it drops in Canada next week. So everywhere you can get it. And if you cannot find it online and you're a Seahawks fan and you go to a game, I will have them on me. DM me. We can meet up in the parking lot, at the front gate, and at the popcorn stand. I will have it. I'll sign it for you. Just let me know. And that's on the road too. If you're a Seahawks fan somewhere and you're going to the Falcons game, or I don't have the whole schedule in front of me, but anywhere on the road, I'll bring some with me, and I'll always have it. So don't fret. I'll make sure you get a book. I am determined to make sure anyone who wants one can get one.
All right, I might take you up on that offer when you play the Panthers here. We're located in North Carolina, so that may be later on in the year. But it sounds like it's not just for Seahawk fans. It's for fans of the NFL who love great stories. This era, not just Seattle, but the stories that go along with it seem like they're pretty relatable to a lot of people out there and a lot of franchises as well.
And that's another reason why I wanted to narrow the scope, because this scope I think is universal. If you're an NFL fan from Philly or Green Bay or Dallas, you'll at least be curious about how the whole Russell Wilson thing, even if you just skip to those chapters in the Super Bowl chapters, you're going to learn something. I think it's compelling enough to transcend the market. I think the Legion of Boom, I know is. I spent a decent amount of their chapter just talking about their ubiquity. Like they were internationally and globally famous. They are the biggest team in Germany, like in terms of fan club like membership. And I learned that when I went over there. They are massive in London. The UK Seahawkers fan group is huge. I learned that when I went over there. I've met the people who run the thing, and like I've done podcasts over there and everything. But we get listeners from our show on Spain and Brazil and Scotland. I've met some of these people when I've traveled internationally too. The Seahawks became an international brand without giving the entire history of why. The main thing is a lot of these countries that I'm talking about got the NFL at a time when the Seahawks was hot. They started getting the NFL over there in London and stuff like that. It started with you'd get like the playoff games in 2011, 2012. Who was in them? The Seahawks. And that's why Tom Brady's so big as well, because you were basically getting the Seahawks and Brady for a good 4 or 5 year chunk, and they just fell in love with the team. That's why they're so big. They were internationally famous. So I think that's also why I narrowed the scope for not only for international fans, but also just, if you're just a random NFL fan from Chicago and you're like, yeah, what did happen with those Pete Carroll Legion of Boom teams? Oh, there's a book. Let me check it out. This is for you as well.
Again, the book out now, the franchise, Seattle Seahawks. Get it from Triumph Books, great partners of ours who helped arrange this sit down. They've done that for us for a number of years. Michael-Shawn, appreciate your time here today and diving in. Can't thank you enough for spending a little time with us here today.
Oh, thank you for having me. I really appreciate it.
Thanks to Michael-Shawn Dugar for joining us, sharing his story about his book. And again, as always, Triumph Books helping us out as they help arrange that sit down. They've been such great friends of our program, as we've had about 10 or more of their guests on in the past. So we certainly appreciate their help with that. Whether you're a Seahawks fan or not, go check out this book. A lot of drama, certainly behind the scenes of the Seattle Seahawks in that Legion of Boom era. As always, we thank you for watching and listening and invite you to like, to subscribe, to share. We continue to grow our show, continue to add some new content as well, and we continue to bring J.R. Equipment from behind the scenes at times as well. Check those episodes of Behind the Front Row coming your way as well. As always, we thank you, and again, be sure to subscribe to our show as we continue to help elevate it and also help bring you some great guests like Michael-Shawn Dugar. Thanks for watching. We'll see you next time on In the Front Row. Have a great day, everybody.